I want to focus on this notion of fatigue for a minute. And you have a particular definition of fatigue that I think is an important one for us about an imbalance. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think people use fatigue in many ways. To me, what I've learned as the more I've looked at physiology is fatigue is not the volume of stress or the presence of stress. You require stress for performance. It's unavoidable. However, it is the disequilibrium of recovery and stress. If you have insufficient recovery to process stress, eventually you decline through emotional and intellectual discordance. It's a consequence of a physiological fatigue, which is the imbalance between stress and recovery, that then progresses.
Right. And I think I'm correct if we had an MD on the line with us that they'd say sustained fatigue, meaning sustained stress with an inappropriate recovery strategy, is what leads to physical burnout. And physical burnout is a medical condition that will land you in the bed, unable to get out of the bed, and taking about 6 to 9 months for serious recovery. It is medical, it's definable, and it will take a physician's care to get you out of it. I know we often use the word burnout, meaning I'm on the edge of burnout or I'm feeling more exhausted. So I think it would be fair to say this fatigue has a light end scale and a more dramatic sustained scale over periods of time from which recovery is really dramatic. Does that make sense to you, Andrew?
It does. I mean, we would say that burnout, significant, the sort of burnout you're describing is a 3Q disease. It's when all three core pillars of performance are pulled away and you are unable to perform as in a way that's recognizable. Things that would be indicators of that would be an extrovert suddenly becoming very introspective and uncommunicative, or an introvert become unexpectedly extroverted. It would be an inversion of natural behavior, or a very smart person making very illogical decisions. And we see with behavioral science where that presents itself.
If I want peak performance for my team and all that comes with it, the cognitive, the emotional, the performance, the engagement, the passion and everything, I can't now say something like everybody take an hour off at lunch or everybody stop their emails at 10 o'clock at night. Solutions a couple of my clients have gone to, because that isn't what's going to work for everybody. So I have to find ways of allowing everybody to craft their own recovery scheme and encourage them to actively do that. So 4 30-minute meeting breaks, 30-minute meetings with no breaks in between is the top graph. More blue, the less stress. And so what you see is very little stress in the first meeting, accumulated stress, and not as much, but still stressed by the fourth meeting. I imagine because by the fourth meeting, you're largely just checking out. And in the second meeting, same set of people, we had them rotate, 4 meetings, same amount of meeting time, but a 10-minute break in between. That's it. If that is not strong enough evidence for the power of recovery, there you go. And here's the brain activity on a minute-by-minute basis. Notice that the peak is much higher without a break. And notice that the incremental scale increases. Whereas here with a break, we can sustain equal performance and engagement throughout 4 meetings by just inserting a minute in between. I thought that was a pretty powerful demonstration of what recovery will give you. Now, we're probably not going to take 10-minute breaks between every meeting. That's probably excessive, but it shows you what recovery will do.
What is the physiological quotient? We have a definition here. It's important for you to understand it's a gap analysis, a scientifically validated indicator of an individual's executive performance potential as defined by their essential body systems. It is looking at physiology, and the root that we start with is the function of the autonomic nervous system, which regulates our body and influences every organ. And it's a function of our hormonal balance. Ultimately, it comes down to 2 systems running at the same time. The sympathetic nervous system, which lifts our metabolic activity, stress, or our parasympathetic nervous system, which is calming. They're constantly regulating us because in truth, the human is constantly being stimulated and calmed. And what we should be aiming for is to be operating within boundaries. The reason that I launched PQ was that executives have no ideas what this boundary is. But if you can visualize in your own head This is homeostasis, the healthy balance between the stimulation of sympathetic nervous activity and the calming of parasympathetic nervous activity. Psychologists have a notion called eustress, which is stress, positive stress, which is delivering performance and high function. This is what we should be aiming for. We all know insufficient stimulation, and there's been a lot of that over lockdown. And we also know excessive stimulation, which leads to distress psychologically, where we are burnt out by environment of pressure, but no reward. This is the place that we're looking to operate in, the eustress environment. And another way of visualizing this is the pressure performance curve, which links to a lot of what Wanda's been talking about. There is a slow climb of increasing pressure and increasing human output. But beyond this point, we are in the space that we're talking about, fatigue. This is physiological surplus of stress, unrecovered. And if that builds, the decline is accelerated. And this is probably emotional exhaustion, and this will be cognitive exhaustion. And our proposition is if you intervene prior to this with recovery in the way exactly that Wanda showed you, you create a floor here. If you create that floor, not only can you reach the previous peak, you can actually start building towards new higher peaks of